To love your country is to love it as it is. When you say, I can't stand it now, but if we could get rid of all of the people I don't like, if we could get rid of all the social changes of the past 50 years, then I'd love it. Well, then you love some fantasy.
We know of new methods of attack. The Trojan horse, the fifth column.
Greetings and welcome to another exciting installment of the Fifth Column Podcast. This is your weekly rhetorical assault on the news cycle, the people that make it, occasionally ourselves. I'm Kmele Foster, delighted to be here. Michael Moynihan is here. Matt Welch is here. We have
day trading. What are you doing down there?
It's okay. Let him make his money.
I got a call. I was seeing who it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was my doctor.
He's buying on the SpaceX on the dip.
Yeah.
And we are also joined by a guest in the studio today. The esteemed Mr. Frum is here. David Frum, The Atlantic.
That sounds like a pre-obituary.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
We're not giving you a Lifetime Achievement Award.
No,
I'm not suggesting anything.
We're going to wait till we release this.
No, I'm delighted to have you here in the land of the living.
Thank you.
Hanging out with us for a little bit, talking to us about various things political. We've got some recent election results. Yeah, but he's been opining on American politics for a very long time, writing speeches for prominent Republicans.
Aware that he's an interloper.
Build in the discount.
He is an immigrant. Yes, and David, by the way, I start with the nice stuff. I start with the nice stuff before we attack him and tear him apart. David, when I first met you, I told you the first time we met that you did write one book that was one of my favorite books of the year that I read it. The book about the 70s,
yes,
which is a phenomenal book. Get it back in print because it's how we got here.
Yeah, when you're not
exactly. Brilliant memory.
Yeah, so how we got here, the book about the 70s. If you listen to David and say, meh, still buy the 70s book. Even if you're MAGA, go buy the 70s book. It's a great book.
I don't think they will.
No, we're illiterate people. But one other thing I want to say before we start.
Yeah.
We did a members-only episode a couple of days ago.
Yeah, the Tuesday before the election.
I just returned from my sojourn to Europe, a bit sick, but
Sick.
weary. But go subscribe, by the way, because it's a great episode. But I just want to apologize that I think that I might have had a few too many drinks during the episode. Yeah. So, dear listeners, me to you looking directly into the camera, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Not sorry.
If you just get the free sample, I'm fine. It gets worse. So that's an apology to our
The
listeners.
tell is not slurring, although I think you might have. But
gotten there.
that's which is a very steep for Moynihan to ever get an S
the Irish
wrong.
Takes a while.
It's the volume.
The volume got up.
The volume. Yeah.
I think they level that though.
Low or high?
It goes low.
Oh,
it goes
yeah,
high.
no.
Very high.
Yeah.
I get very energetic, David.
Yes.
So I apologize for that. But David Frum, The Atlantic, staff writer.
Yeah.
Is that what you're doing now? Now you have a podcast.
Correct.
Why are you competing with us? Mind your business.
It's The Atlantic recently unionized, and I think in the union contract of media people, it's everyone in America is obliged to have a But I think if you get like you arrange the draft numbers right, you can be deferred. But but if you don't get the deferment, you have to do the podcast.
Are you in the union?
I am in the union.
You are the Harry Bridges of the Atlantic.
I am in the union.
You used to be a conservative, sir.
Yes.
Well, one of the things you discover about unions is they're not voluntary. So
which is the old conservative argument. He's doing the right to work stuff at the Atlantic. Well, I'll have to talk to Jeff Goldberg.
Yeah,
about that.
So the podcast is it's very solo. It's me plus a guest. I do a monologue before, I do a book review after, and it's kind of an anti-podcast because every podcast ends with the discussion of a book in printed form to remind you that you should consume content not just through your ears but through your eyes, and we do a lot of pretty rigorous stuff. The last show, we are not into clickbait. The last show was looking back on the political and economic legacy of Herbert Hoover.
That was a real belt loosener.
I'll go to the mat on that one.
But you did also, a recent one, end it with a discussion of your favorite anti-Semitic author, John le Carre. So, and you did recommend The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which is a good book.
Yeah.
And then it was all downhill from there. I do recommend people read Clive James's go back into the cold. His review of all of Le Carré's books. It was in the New York Review of Books. One of the funniest reviews.
I have to read that.
It's extremely funny.
But I didn't review the book. I talked about the genre. Why did the spy novel emerge in the 20th century? And I offered two theses. The first was that spy novels are attempts to write about bureaucracy. Which is a new experience in the 20th century. It's about people who have to wrestle with problems of fundamental good and evil within the context of giant bureaucratic apparatuses. And sometimes there's more fantasy, like you never see James Bond fill out an expense report. Whereas John le Carré's characters
it's a lot of expense reports.
A lot of expense reports. And then the second thing is, and this is I think why it has been so associated with English writers. And in the United States, where the spies tend to become more like Spider-Man or superheroes with extraordinary powers, the people who write, at least my favorite spy novels, tend to be Jewish, Daniel Silva and Alan Furst. And because spy novels are about the experience of people who are secretly powerful. The spy is the most marginal of marginal characters. And the American writing about the bureaucracy and good and evil tends to be Tom Clancy, giant machines, where the power is very visible.
And they're hyper competent.
In the British, with their experience of having their power displaced in the 20th century, the Jews who live on the margins of society, the spy novel speaks to that experience in a way that the techno fantasy really does not.
There's a great movie. It's actually the precursor to, or the original of True Lies, what became True Lies in America.
The Schwarzenegger movie.
The Schwarzenegger movie, which is fantastic.
It's a very sexy movie.
Jamie Lee Curtis movie called The Functionary, Il Fonctionnaire, French a movie that came out before. And the conceit of it's totally different than True Lies. And it's terrific. It's that he is, in the French parlance, a functionary. You're a bureaucrat. You will have the most boring job. You just work for the government. You got your state job. You can retire safely at age 57 or whatever, and have a lifetime. But you're boring. You're fundamentally boring. And that guy turns out to have a secret life as a James Bond that everyone's like, can you even believe it? But it plays right into that bureaucratic thing.
To get to your background through this, in the John le Carré thing, you pointed out that the books that he read, particularly Spy Who Came from the Cold, is that it's kind of a reaction to Fleming. It's kind of a reaction to the swashbuckling, good-looking superhero kind of guy. And then you have somebody like William F. Buckley, who does a series of spy books, none of which I've ever read, called Blackford Oaks, which was a reaction to le Carré. You started your career in the U.S. working for Buckley, right? You started at National Review? Am I wrong in thinking that was the first thing in the U.S.?
No, it's approximately true. So I got to know Buckley when I was an undergraduate. I was offered a job at National Review when I graduated, which I turned down.
Because you went to Yale.
I went to Yale, so that was
which is the first
bona fide job qualification at National Review. And I came and I'm writing a memoir, so this is all very fresh in my mind. And I've been going through old files and refreshing my memories of things. And I admired him so much. I was close to his son, Christopher, whom I just remains friends to this day. And they were Buckley and Bill Buckley was kind enough to invite me to lunch at that amazing house in Stamford. And it was such an exciting thing. And I thought on the train ride there, is it possible they're going to offer me a job? That would be so amazing. No, that would be so amazing. That would be too amazing to be believed. Probably not, but maybe. What would I do? And then they did. And then I turned it down. And I am still to this day, I'm not 100% sure why I did it.
Really?
But it was what I did it because I'm not a joiner. I did not, and I sometimes think because I've had this irregular relationship with the conservative world all my life. Yeah. And I think being offered the golden Willy Wonka ticket and saying, I'll do it my own way instead, which was a spur of the moment decision.
But you wrote for them quite a bit.
I wrote for them quite a bit.
And at that point, you're 22 years old, something like that, just out of Yale. You're a Canadian. Yeah. Your mother is Barbara Frum, the journalist, and she was the host of As It Happens. Is that right? On CBC?
My mother was probably, after the Queen, the most visible, instantly recognizable female face and voice in Canada from about 1971 till her untimely death at age 54 in 1992. She hosted a radio show called As It Happens, which is which was copied.
All things considered, basically.
All things considered, copied the format.
Yeah.
And then, in the spirit of free trade,
Yeah.
my mother, and the second 10 years of her career, was on a show that copied Nightline.
Yeah.
So the Americans ripped off the radio idea, but the Canadians then borrowed Nightline, and she was then the main interviewer on the nightly evening interview show after the hard news at 10.
Yeah, but you lay all this stuff out, all this biographical detail out, and then no one has any idea who the names are. And you say, well, and then the son becomes a prominent conservative. Yeah. It's not something you would imagine. CBC, Canada, your background. What was it when you were 22 years old, 21 years old, you said, maybe I'm not a Republican because I'm not American, but I'm a conservative. I'm sort of tilting towards this side of the political aisle.
Again, I've been. You happen to touch a fertile nerve because I've been thinking about this a lot recently. Here's the necessary background fact. I'm an Ashkenazi Jew on both sides. My father's family came to Canada from Poland in 1930. He was born in Toronto in 1931. Most of their family remained behind in Poland, and to a person, or with one or two exceptions, murdered. And had my father's parents made a slightly different decision in 1930, and they didn't have big ideas. They were not victims of persecution. The economy was terrible. They had relatives in Toronto, so they moved. Had they made a different decision, my father would have been murdered about the time of his 10th or 11th birthday. On my mother's side, her parents were, by the standards of the small town in which they lived, prosperous people. And they bought their handsome house in Niagara Falls, Ontario in 1942, which happens to be the single most murderous year in the history of the Jewish people. So I was now none of this was talked about this was all too much to talk about when the relevant people were alive. We only began to talk about it after the relevant people were gone. It was too. How do you find words for these contrasting experiences?
You knew it, but you knew not to talk about it, or you sort of knew it?
I sort of knew it. I knew more of the details as I grew up. Some of them had been obscure. A lot of the people who had the knife whistle past their ear just never wanted to think about it again. It was too. My father's side. I mean, parents, grandparents, cousins, children, everybody killed in by bullets, killed not with the. This is before the killing machine, the industrialized machinery of the death camps was created. Killed by bullets, killed by starvation, killed by being locked 27 people into a room when an infectious disease goes through. Killed in ways you don't. It takes you 20 years even to get any notion of exactly how did your mother die. But when to the question of my political development, so one of the things, and then my parents did well. My mother was this prominent journalist. My father began as a dentist, was a successful businessman, and we lived in conditions of security and prosperity that simply unimaginable in the history of anybody with my DNA going back 2,000 years. And so my earliest political thought was, because the grown-ups around me didn't want to talk about any of this, is that a little conceitedly, but I was a big reader as a kid. At age 14 or 15, I became convinced I understand that everything we have is more vulnerable than anybody around me wants to admit. And because it's canon, I understand that it is all protected not by the RCMP, but by these giant institutions of power that ultimately rest on the United States. That's why we are not going to meet the fate of my grandparents. And that's why my maternal grandparents had the degree of prosperity and security that they had. And so I wasn't Alex B. Keaton. I wasn't a rebel against my parents. I thought I was very close to both my parents and admired them, and to this day carry their ideas and even their turns of phrase upon me. But my formative political thought was, this has to be protected, and it has to be protected in a more explicit and affirmative way than my parents' politics allowed them to acknowledge.
I wonder, how does that sense of fragility, that sensation inside of you changed over that time? Like, you're 15, so you're headstrong and you're a little bit solipsistic.
Mouthy.
But whatever you're also
unbearable, I think is the word we're looking for.
But you're thrusting
in this job. You're all unbearable.
You're thrusting yourself in the world, and you're starting a career. You have this maybe sort of a crusading sense of this must be protected. Let's identify the sources of the strength that is keeping this, and also like the potential dangers.
Protected from who?
Protected from who, and all this kind of stuff. And the world changes a lot after the end of the Cold War.
Yeah.
And then it certainly changed a lot over the last 12 years.
Yeah.
Like, did your sense of fragility go into remission for a while in that long period, and then it is now kind of awakened and still undergirds your work?
In the early Cold War period, for sure it did. Our friend Christopher Hitchens always described himself as fundamentally a man of 1968.
Yeah.
And I realized however long I live, I will always be a man of 1989.
Yeah, me too.
Me too, yeah.
That's the miracle year. That's what everything I believed in. And there may be younger people listening who don't understand this. 1989 was not just the year that the Berlin Wall came down and that Europe or Germany was reunited and Europe was reunited. It spread all over the planet.
All over the planet.
So between 1989 and 1994, you get the coming of democracy to the Pacific Fringe, to Taiwan and South Korea. You get the overturning of the Pinochet dictatorship in Chile. I visited Chile during the dictatorship and had smelt how terrifying it was. You get the end of apartheid in South Africa. You get India and Mexico becoming a multi-party democracy for the first time in its history. India opening its markets, China opening its markets. It's this
Vietnam opening its markets.
Everything one could ever have imagined happening and within approximately half a decade.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was a vindication of all the things I believed. But what I did believe was, okay, the question, because I'm always very historically minded, the question was, would the people of 1989 to 1994 prove themselves the equals of those from 1946 to 1950 who'd built institutions to make all of this last? And then to finish the story. And so one of the reasons that the Trump experience has been so radicalizing for me, not radicalizing because I don't know that I've changed so many of my views, but so galvanizing has been, I see all of this because it all rests on American institutions, American power, American involvement in the world. That is the guarantor of this whole system. And when America implodes upon itself, betrays its best nature, becomes a predatory instead of a benign power, the whole world system begins to spiral. And so I see that I don't know, and we can talk about how permanent this is all likely to be, but since over the past decade, and this is a kind of undoing, a withdrawal of America from its best self, a withdrawal of America from the world, and the spiral of the world back to the nightmares that existed before I was born.
A lot of your writing, as you just said, is based on kind of a grand sweep of modern history. That you take that into consideration. I think of people like George Will and George Will's columns. I mean, he will randomly write a column about the Einsatzgruppen just to remind everybody of the evil that exists and in the world, it had existed in the world. And it reminds me of my friend Noam Dworman, who's been on the show, owns a Comedy Cellar here, talking to me about his father, who is Manny, Menachem, who was born in Israel, in what he thought about America, which was just this, had the most sort of expansive view of the greatness of America because what it provided him and his family. And I see a lot of that. It's not as if you would have grown up speaking Polish. You wouldn't have been able to grow up at all because your father would have been killed. And then you look at now, you wrote a column recently, not too long ago, about the globalized, the Intifada idea in that sort of movement. And you see a lot of Jews in this city. And I remember Norman Podhoretz wrote a long time ago, why are Jews liberal, wrote this book. And people who have no connection, despite their families have this connection, to these old ideas of what can go horribly wrong when people are, blaming the Jews for everything and finding Jewish conspiracies. And this is unfortunately on the right and left, and almost an equal measure now, from the Tucker Carlsons on one side, somebody who you knew in the past, to the, I wouldn't say AOC, these people who are running, who was the one here?
El Sayed won.
El Sayed, who won
literally yesterday.
Yesterday. But do you feel there's a kind of a disconnection, a generational thing, that a certain amount of time it stops? and no one is looking backwards because you had those connections to your family, and it informs so much of what you say and what you write and what you believe. Are we at a point now where people don't remember the Cold War, and you have Hassan Piker praising Mao and saying the Soviet Union, the collapse of that was a great tragedy? I mean, where are we now in that kind of view of what to us is recent history that informs what we believed and believe?
Well, the dimming of historical memory, or the distance from historical memory, for sure is part of the story. But I think there's something else that goes on, which is one of the questions that confronting the horrors of the human past involves you to think about is, could it have happened to you? You, wonderful, lovely, important you.
Brave you.
Brave you, noble you, moral you. Could you have been vulnerable? And the thought of that's a very painful thought. And so people want to believe in a version of the world around them. History, no history. Because these things that happened in the past, Anne Applebaum in her book on the Gulag has this wonderful sentence that needs to be chiseled somewhere. I write this story of the Soviet Gulag not so that it will never happen again, but because it will happen again. It happens all the time. These bestialities and brutalities are unleashed. And if you live in the comfort and security of the United States, the prosperity of the United States, you don't want to think that. And to really grapple with these things is to face your own mortality, your own vulnerability. You just got lucky. My late father, again, I mentioned he was a successful businessman. He is a man of many, many wonderful sayings. And one of his sayings is, God blesses you by making you lucky and then curses you by making you think you are so smart. and one of the things he always wanted to stress was a lot of what happens to you, and I don't know whether this is my least conservative belief or my most conservative belief, is the extraordinary fact of luck, including being born where you were, being born without the disabilities that might have attended you, being born without the psychic or other problems you might have had, that all the things you think are you are products of chance and luck, and your environment is. So that's a hard thing to face, and people would like to believe, you know what, if we just said the right formulas or did the right things, then the need to keep danger and horror at bay, that would vanish. And we could live our noble, perfect lives.
That's your most conservative belief, that you don't believe that if we just have the formula right. But the Anne Applebaum quote reminds me of the scene in the Woody Allen movie Hannah and Her Sisters, when Max von Sydow is saying, there's a woman in his apartment, he's watching a documentary on the Holocaust, and she says, I can't believe this happened. And Max von Sydow, in his very Swedish way, walks by and he says, I can't believe it doesn't happen more often. Right? I mean, it's very, very similar sentiment. But of the people that you knew, and presumably aren't friends with, we all have these, from your time, either in the conservative movement or adjacent to it, who have not been brave, who have disappointed you, Tucker Carlson presumably being top of almost everybody's list. Who are those people? Are there people that really have massively disappointed you by betraying what you believe were their principles to, basic conservative principles in a way?
Can I just put a pin briefly in that word brave? Yeah. So one of the things that will sometimes be said about never Trump conservatives, the people who broke with Trump on this, is that people say, you're so brave. No, we weren't. No. We're not in a concentration camp. Yes, some people have passed by the chance to make ill-gotten, disgusting, dirty money. So they forfeited some economic opportunities, whether reasonable that they could have stayed. They lost a job that they could have, under different political circumstances, could have kept, or they could have cashed in on this giant bonanza of unprecedented corruption.
From coin.
Yeah, exactly. And so corruption that can't be compared, when people say this is the most X or Y in American history, it can't be compared to anything in American history. It's the Philippines. It's post-Soviet republic. It's post-colonial Africa. It's like nothing that has ever been seen in any democratic country ever. And some people are getting pieces of it. I mean, for everyone who's making billions, there are 100 people who are making millions, and 1,000 people who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so you miss your chance. That's not bravery. So the question I keep saying is, so little is asked. Yeah. So and some of it is socially awkward, and some of it involves maybe more assertions of personal independence than you're comfortable with, because we are pack animals. But It's easy. So why don't you do it? Now, I try to be very particular in my judgments about different people who have done different things. Some people make decisions that are mildly blameworthy. Some people make decisions that are more severe. Some people are faced with really awkward choices, which is there are always people who say, well, it would be worse if I didn't take part. And sometimes that's even true.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's true.
It's better to have me in the administration than me outside.
Sometimes that's true. And sometimes even if it's not true, it's still an understandable problem.
Personal justification.
Yeah, well, it can be a rationalization. It can, but sometimes it really is true, especially for people in some of the national security and law enforcement and intelligence jobs.
Sure.
And sometimes it's just that they say, I need to time my resignation so it will arrive when it counts. And I don't want to resign over the first thing because there will someday be an more important thing, and I need to save my resignation. So I want to be specific in judgment, and we all also have to be charitable with people. Do have mortgages, they do have children, and even though you're not brave, you're not facing anything. There's still economic uncertainty that people have to get through. And even in this prosperous country, abounding in opportunities, people say, "Well, will my next opportunity be as good as the one I'm saying goodbye to?" And that's not a light thing to summon people to do. But yes, there have been people who disappointed me.
Who shocked you? Anyone shocked you? Anyone shocked you in the, I know certain people who have been very close with Tucker Carlson who are really shocked by how far he went. But is there anyone beyond the obvious one of Tucker that really shocked you?
Tucker doesn't shock me because he was always capable of so many. When I knew him well in the 1990s and early 2000s, even then, he was always capable of many things, some of them good. But people are capable of many things, are capable also of things that are bad. So if you'd said to me in 1998, this person is going to become what he has become, I mean, I wouldn't have guessed it, but I'm not surprised when you tell me. I think the ones who shock me more, are the people who have real intellectual gifts, people at the Claremont Institute and places like that, who have a real commitment to the American Constitution, who understand the institution.
You're using the present tense.
Yes.
Do you want to still hold on to that present tense, talking about the Claremont Institute?
Okay, but they had it.
Yeah.
And then apply these prodigious powers of thinking to rationalize and to turn on their heads what they used to believe. That's what shocks me. And they do it for no reason. They do it for sport, or they do it because, and this is, we've all been exposed to this temptation of letting your indignation and irritation with things that are genuinely irritating and offensive drive you to places where you would never have voluntarily gone. And one of the things, and this is about our line of work, including especially this format, in the podcast world, we are exposed both to pushes and to pulls. So the push is there's somebody powerful or wealthy or influential behind you, someone whose support you need, who says do this or do that, and that's basically an order. And that's the push. And we've all encountered people who are susceptible to the push. But there's also the pull. There are the people out there who want certain things and don't want other things. And thanks to modern information technology, we all know instantly what they want and what they don't want, and how much they want it and how much they don't want it. And they pull us. And I've seen that happen too, of people being, and you say, you didn't have to do it, but it's kind of, the roar of the grease paint, the smell of the crowd. They couldn't resist. And we all know people like this. And you say, well, you're doing this just for a higher YouTube count?
Mm-hmm. Has there been a pull toward on you in the last dozen years for come to the resistance, David Frum?
Yeah, that's about to start. That's about to start.
What do you mean?
Start?
Yeah, not on me personally, but on. So, as in 2018 to 2020, the Democratic Party made it very easy for people like me, which is to say, look, we all want to stop Trump, right? And we all want the broadest possible coalition to stop Trump. So we're going to assemble a group of pretty level-headed people. They may be a little bit more liberal than you. They might just, we know you don't like the student loan cancellation. We know you don't like that, but you're just going to have to live with that. And is that the worst thing in the world? And I said, well, I can live with the student loan cancellation. They made it easy. And they made it easy through 22 and 24, and now they're making it not so easy. Now they're saying we are going in a direction where we're going to do some things that really shock and offend you.
So wait, a moment ago you said 2020, then you just went further and said 22, 24. What happened in 2020 that started to make this more of a difficult arrangement?
So what happens is that the very broad Democratic coalition that won the House in 2018, that elected Biden in 2020, there are elements in that coalition who said, now we have a mandate to do real progressive change. And they didn't have a mandate for it. They had an opportunity, and I can't entirely blame them for Trump gave them an opportunity. And one of the things I said through the first term is the price of Trump is going to be an America that ends up being more left-wing than it otherwise would be, because in order to sustain the anti-Trump coalition, the center is going to have to make concessions to the left that it would not otherwise have had to make under a more normal kind of Republican. But they really took that opportunity. And they took it a lot while Biden was president, either because he agreed or because he was not in a condition to stop it. And now, post-Biden, they've interpreted the defeat of 2024 as the American people demanding ever more wild and radical things, wanting an ever bigger challenge to the American system. And so in the 2026 cycle, we see a Democratic Party that is not in its entirety, but that where a really extreme faction of it has gained a lot of power. And that's going to change the whole coalition. And again, they're going to make it difficult. And those who come from the Republican and conservative tradition, who are part of the Never Trump coalition, we're going to have to make some very difficult choices. And
but some of those choices kind of shock me in the sense that you can sit on your hands, you can, oppose this stuff. You don't have to come out and support it directly. And I see people that were conservatives, worked at the Weekly Standard, talking about court packing, talking about Graham Plattner in an extremely positive way, a man with a Totenkopf tattoo on his chest, right? In people who identified 10 years ago as rock-ribbed conservatives, and that was the reason they were opposing Donald Trump, now supporting these things.
So the classic story here is a fable by James Thurber called The Bear Who Could Take It or Leave It Alone. And it's the story of a bear who becomes an alcoholic and comes reeling home drunk and falls flat on his face, and his wife is very afraid, and his children are very upset. His children are very afraid, and his wife is very upset. But at length, good news, a temperance preacher comes through town. The bear sees the error of his ways, takes the pledge, forswears liquor, and not only that, to prove how healthful teetotaling is, he takes up calisthenics, and he will do handsprings in the bedroom and knock over the furniture and fall flat on his back. And his wife is very upset, and his children are very afraid. And the moral of the story is it's just as bad to fall flat on your back as it is to fall flat on your face. And that's something that everybody in politics needs to keep in mind. And it's hard. But my object here, and whatever little few pebbles of weight that I bring to the course of history, is on behalf of some things. And those things can face many dangers. And at any given moment, some of them are more urgent than others, and you always have to make compromises. And it's hard to know what are the compromises that are right at that juncture of events. But don't lose sight of what it is that you come to do. Don't lose sight of what it is you believe in and what it is you oppose.
Did you make any compromises that you regret?
I've done many things in my life. I've done many things I regret. But in the Trump era, compromises. So far, not. I mean, so far, I think that generally making my peace with policy outcomes that are more liberalish than I would have liked has to date not been a higher price than I expected to have to pay. But I think in the next political cycle, that's this work of thinking is going to become much more difficult. And there are a lot of questions that I'm in the middle of thinking about. And I will tell you, I don't yet have an answer to this choice or that choice. I expect to, because again, I've changed my mind about a lot of things over the years. I always feel, not because anyone cares, but because it's your responsibility as a thinking person. If you change your mind, you have to put on the record,
explain
why.
Yes.
Not because again anybody cares. But just so it's not arbitrary, just so people can see it's not driven by popular. You thought it through. So this is why I used to think X. This is the process by which I came to believe Y instead, or plus X, or that X was partly true, but not true enough.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I've changed. This is where I am now. And that's just my account. That's my guarantee of quality service to you. Whoever is interested.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask if we could help you navigate some of those unresolved quandaries that you're dealing with now.
Well, the hardest quandary, we're speaking the day after the Michigan primary, is if what you want to do is restore the rule of law, protect free trade, protect the Department of Justice, protect the courts from bad judges who shouldn't be there, because by and large, to this point, with a few exceptions, I think the courts have been a bulwark, and they have done good service. I don't like the Trump immunity decision at all, but if you really enter into it, you see they had a real problem, and I don't like their answer, but it's not like I can glibly dismiss the problem they faced. So if you want to protect all that, it's very important that Trump's party not keep control of the Senate. On the other hand, the Democrats seem to want to put in the Senate people who are as hostile to American institutions in ways, in their way, even if it's a less popular and immediately dangerous way. And then you have to make your decision case by case. And in some of the cases, the unacceptable Democrat faces an equally or nearly equally unacceptable Republican. That's the case of the Wisconsin governorship, where it's wacko versus wacko. But in the Michigan Senate race, you face someone who, on a different timeline, would be a perfectly normal, sensible Republican against
Mike Rogers,
yeah,
who was in the House for 8 years?
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, he's kind of
to 2014. It was
he's
pre-Trump.
a national security pre-Trump guy.
Yeah, perfectly responsible choice. I mean, he will do some bad things because party discipline will make him do them, but he's in the American mainstream, and he faces an opponent who's not, and
so you don't know who you'd vote for if you were in Michigan? Is that what you're telling us? Because I know who I wouldn't vote for. That's pretty easy.
I think I know who I would vote for, but I'm second guess. I would have some. I would have to. I would not say my thinking process is quite over yet. Although,
what are the unanswered questions there?
So you guys have to name names too.
Okay.
So it's a question. I would vote for.
Okay. So it's a question of the consequences of voting for Mike Rogers are bad consequences, because it empowers Trump. But the El Said choice is a bad choice, and it's especially when the message of a candidate to me is, look, I'm a little worried about your stance about the Jewish people in America and the Jewish people in the world, and the candidate's answer is, look, so long as you disavow half your people, I'm prepared to guarantee your physical safety. I believe there should be no violent attacks on American Jews, and I will as if you were my own children, I will prevent violent attacks on you. And all I ask in return for this guarantee of your physical safety is that you disavow who you are. Mm-hmm. Right? I've heard that before. And the answer is no. The answer is no.
I mean, the idea of globalizing Intifada, there's an attack on a Jewish daycare in Michigan. In his response is ultimately, after being pushed, it's bad, but so is what's happening in Gaza, which is the idea of globalizing the Intifada. What does Gaza have to do with attacking Jewish children in Michigan? It's all part of one big morality play for him, which is a very, very dangerous way of thinking.
I think the answer that kind of candidate, that DSA candidate, is moving toward, and Mayor Mamdani is getting there first, is say, okay, we regret seeming to be indifferent to the attack on the daycare center, which was ultimately unsuccessful, it should be said, thanks to the heroism of the people there. And we are prepared. Thinking it over, we do think that those Jews who live in the United States, North America, should have their physical safety guaranteed. We do think that. But there's a price. And if you don't meet the price, then whatever happens to you is your own fault. And the price is that you disavow who you are and what you believe. If you'll do that, your physical safety will be guaranteed. And I just think, I listened to that offer. As I say, Jews have heard that offer through history.
Can't vote for someone who says that.
And you can't vote for someone who says that.
Yeah.
Even though the consequences of voting for the other guy may, in the near term, be worse.
But isn't it, I would say, as we've said on the show, Matt especially, that Rogers is a rat bag of epic proportions. But
He's
I mean,
not my
one of the
favorite.
things that I would say he has going for him, and this is where we are in American politics, is that I don't know if he believes in anything.
Yeah.
I'm more afraid of the person who believes in something in this race because it appears that Said has some very core beliefs that he's trying to kind of walk away because now he has to win a statewide election in Michigan, which Trump won twice, but is trending.
I don't think he's
away
going to. It was one of the services the Never Trump Republicans can provide their current and maybe someday former coalition partners. Say, you understand that the Republican Party of the United States is a very effective and ruthless power-seeking machine. You've been playing high school ball against Democrats who are just covered with inhibition. So you have candidates who get very close to who stand candidates who literally stand beside somebody who said America deserved 9/11, and they're in a Democratic primary, and it's in the Democratic primary. It's bad form to do too much with that. Bad form. They don't do too. They do a little. They don't do too much. So now you're about to take. Congratulations, you won your high school league, and now you're going to the NFL. And when you say you can't hit me that hard, they will just say to your crushed, flattened self back there, I just did. Now I'm turning around and ready for another crushing.
I mean, it's a national election with Barack Obama, but recall that he had to run away from Reverend Wright, who said, God damn America, right? And you have people out there in a Senate campaign traveling around with somebody who says America deserved 9/11 and a 1,000 things just as bad, and they're not running away from it.
But that's also, we're in the post running away from era.
Of course, and it's Trump is the person who established a lot of that stuff.
It is the post running away from moment, but it's also, there is I was just talking to my friend Isaac Saul over at Tangle about this yesterday, and there's this like calculation that we're all doing, like who is actually more perilous for you to get behind or at least align with temporarily.
What a great place to be.
It's very, very bad. and I'm thinking about like Fuentes on one side and Piker on the other. And Nick Fuentes had dinner with Donald Trump. Also, Kanye brought him to the dinner. And
that's a really great looking dinner right there.
The other anti-Semite brought him to dinner.
He's healing now. But beyond that, like in general, I don't know that there are any currently elected or prominent aspiring Republicans who are out and out like Fuentes goipers. I don't think that's the case. I don't even know that there's anyone who would have him over for a campaign event. Piker, on the other hand, is going out to Michigan and is rather prominently and publicly palling around with lots and lots of people who are not just
an Obama
actively
era
seeking
phrase, palling around.
They're not just actively seeking office. These are prominent races. These are people who could be really formative figures in the Democratic Party at this point. And it feels materially different, even though, as you pointed out, I think appropriately, Moynihan, there are kind of really ugly vibes, nasty things happening in both parties right now. But there seems to be a kind of quiet permissiveness on the left at the moment that makes me very uncomfortable. And I suppose you are running all of that math alongside this calculation that says there are people on the right who are making compromises, but they seem to be making compromises in places where you imagine they don't actually believe the things they're saying
aloud.
One
thing that I said, which I believe, is that Donald Trump provided that permission structure. But it is incumbent upon you as the other party who has been sneering appropriately at some of this stuff from Donald Trump to not inhabit that same world and say, well, we can get some electoral advantage from this too. So just to be clear about that.
Sure.
Part of the asymmetry here is the Republican and Democratic parties are very different kinds of institutions organized in very different ways. And I compare them. The Republican Party is like Philadelphia as a city. It has a downtown, and it has and the downtown is the densest part, and then it fades out into the suburbs. But there's a base. It is a meaningful thing to talk about the Republican base, and to wonder what it's going to do, and to notice its impact on the people who live in the non-base, in the outer areas. The Democratic Party is like Los Angeles. It's got 5 centers. So who's the base? When people talk about the Democratic base, is it the highly educated urban leftist who made Mayor Mamdani what he is and elected El Sayed? Is it the people who vote for Jim Clyburn? Is it the remains of private sector unions and the powerful forces of the public sector unions? These are different groups with very different views. They often don't like each other very much, and so the Democratic Party is a much more unstable institute. Well, it's a much more contentious institution. It's potentially more stable just because there's much more variety, and there are things going on away from the hot zone at any given moment in a way that the Republican Party can be captured. So I think that's one of the differences between the Republicans' move toward and make no mistake that the train is never late. I mean that. The direction in which Trump is leading the Republican Party will have consequences for all minorities. Jews don't rank as low on the Republican list of animosities as other minority groups do.
They're going up.
But they are as low as high. But the Republican
number 6 with a bullet. Dude.
Yeah, number 6.
Yeah, quite literally in the
Language.
future. Yeah, who knows?
But so there are other groups that they dislike more. But one of the things that we are hungering for are, at least I am, leaders who summon the spirit of generosity, which American leaders have at their best, and that's something that's very much in danger. And the parties are in a spiral competition.
Yeah, it's
I want
mimetic competition.
I want to play a clip for you guys that I know that our crew has seen this morning. We were all laughing about this. And this is Mr. Al Sayed, who wins on Wednesday. I think this was today's Thursday. We're recording this on Thursday. On Wednesday, gave a speech, and I noticed a few curious, odd things. I'm wondering if you guys will notice something similar. And this is Abdul Al Sayed on Wednesday.
As bitter and as divisive and as cynical as the campaign against us might have been, I want us to realize that there is so much more that unites us now. Because the campaign that Mike Rogers and Donald Trump and their GOP MAGA allies are launching is already more bitter. All you got to do is look at the ads you're already watching on TV, started today. They think that you want to use my whole name against me. Mike, listen, man, if you can't say the name, it's Abdurrahman, keep the name out your damn mouth. I'll be happy to give you lessons.
All right, that's good. A couple things about that. I don't know if anyone noticed. I pointed this out to producer Jason, and he said, I wanted you to be wrong about this, and then he realized, maybe I was right. He's kind of starting to sound like Obama.
Yep, clipping it.
He's doing the clip.
Yep, little clip.
They're using my name. They're trying to make me for him. Yeah. And then the funniest thing about that, he's like, you can't pronounce my name? Abdul Rahman. That was like, the most like over the top pronunciation. I was like, what's it?
That's not what I was most struck by in the clip.
Okay. What was that?
I clip is as bitter and divisive as the campaign against us was.
Yeah.
Oh.
That is, there's no generosity for anyone else. There's no thought. There are other people in Michigan politics who have taken some blows. Other people have been made to feel by your supporters physically unsafe, who can't go to conventions because of your supporters.
Including
You're very aware of what has been done.
The Democratic Attorney General,
Very aware of what has been done to you. And that is, when you say, what is the Obama difference? The Obama difference would have been he wouldn't have said the against us.
Yeah.
He would have had a word of generosity for his opponent, at least, and certainly his same party opponent. And to say, I want to reach out. You've won. It's not their job to come to you. It's your job to go to them. And it's your job to say something congratulatory and to say, there have been anti-Semitic threats. There have been other kinds of threats. I say here and now. Remember Bob Dole in 1996 in San Diego. This is the party of Lincoln, and if anyone here thinks otherwise, the exits are clearly marked. That's the way to talk.
Although he's, the leading edge, at least this week, of an insurgency. And whenever there's an intra-party insurgency, when the insurgents win, they're not necessarily magnanimous in that moment. When there's the Tea Party candidates of 2010 that came through, they went against Mitch McConnell's desires or handpicked successors in a bunch of different states. And I don't remember what the tape was, but it maybe wasn't quite a sharp elbow, but it was a bit like that too, because they were insurgents.
But dress for the job you want.
That's true.
And what is the job you want? Do you want to lead the country? Like the thing about among the shocking things about Donald Trump is there's never been an hour where he wanted to be president of the United States. He never thought that he had any duty at all to the people, to the states that voted against him. If your state didn't vote against him and there's a tornado, nerds to you, you get nothing.
There's a great, just an interjection in the Maggie Haberman, Jonathan Swan regime change book. They have several different meetings where it's basically Stephen Miller with a bunch of executives and saying, okay, like, can you get us, your deal has to be producing jobs within Trump's term or forget about it, or, you have to be from a Trump state or not a Trump state. Like, they're just explicit about it.
Yeah. We do in this show, as you people know, our test of Polymarket. But we have David Frum here, and we're going to talk about Michigan. He knows a lot about it. He's been talking about it now. So let's get to some numbers from Tuesday's elections in Michigan. All right. By the way, can we get rid of Graham Plattner in the beginning of that?
Yeah. No, keep him.
Replace him with Goebbels or something? Is that a heavy lift for people?
Keep him.
Yeah.
He's down but not out.
He's down but not out. All right. I want to start with something that very few people notice. This is the 8th district in Michigan. And a bunch of names you haven't heard of, right? And Amir Hassan, this is the Republican who was endorsed by Donald Trump. Donald Trump went on the stump with Amir Hassan and said, here's the guy. He's the guy I got to vote for.
How did he pronounce his name?
He's Amir Hassan. Great guy. We love Amir Hassan. Thomas Smith, who was the Democrat who dropped out of the race. He dropped out of the race and said, everybody throw their support behind Alfred Lemo, right? So if you look at this, Amir Hassan in the Polymarket, if you were looking to Polymarket to give you some tips, I'll defend Polymarket in this way. You could have made some money. You could have made a lot of money because Amir Hassan, these are the numbers, 95, 97%, 98%. 98% all the way, and the election happens. Thomas J. Smith dropped out of the race. As our friend Dave Weigel pointed out, the New York Times reported this, they didn't even have a headshot of him.
Nope.
They had no headshot of the guy that won Donald Trump in uninterrupted string of successes. The man he endorses loses to somebody who wasn't even running. All right, let's look.
Do we think it's just because Thomas Smith sounds like a normal name?
Yeah, it sounds. Yeah, exactly. It was like, I don't know about that guy, but what we have been talking about is the Senate primary, Abdullah al-Sayed. Now, if you look at this stuff, let's actually look at the past week. Past week is pretty impressive because Haley Stevens was, and I talked to our pal Jonathan about this. I said, I think she's going to be more competitive than you're giving her credit for, because what we try to do when we're looking at this Polymarket stuff and looking at polling too, is trying to disaggregate the kind of Twitter world. Is Twitter real life? And all this kind of, this is pretty impressive, this candidate, because al-Sayed is getting enormous barrels of ink in newspapers. MSNBC, CNN, Fox in its negative way, but he's the only guy in this race, if you're paying attention outside of Michigan. And if you look at this on Polymarket, Abdullah al-Sayed is 94, 95%. This is the last week, 97%. Vote returns start coming in, and we get a little uptick from Haley Stevens, who gets up to about 16, 17%. Now, al-Sayed wins. How many people cast votes in this? Anybody out there? Matt, how many people cast votes in this election?
I don't know, man.
You're supposed to be an expert. David, any idea?
No idea.
1.5 million people cast votes in this election. Do you know what the vote difference was? Was it, as Polymarket had it, 97%, 2%, et cetera? The difference in vote totals was 14,000 votes.
Gee-ebus.
If you looked at this and you were trying to get a sense of who was going to win, just this arc over the past week, you would have thought this was going to be something of a blowout. New York Times had a story. What happened to the polling here?
Yeah.
Now, let's be generous to our friends at Polymarket. The polling wasn't much better. It was a little narrower, but it wasn't much better. And this is an interesting thing to look at because these are polls typically that are funded by campaigns or funded by grassroots groups who want, to put their thumb on the scale. They're oversampling young people, et cetera. We don't know the methodology, but the methodology was clearly not good. That was a vote total of 14,000 votes in 1.5 million cast. There was the third candidate, Mallory McMorrow. Spoiler, 60,000 votes. I think she got something around that. So, David, what say you about the polling?
So I wrote a story for The Atlantic when Gallup decided to stop doing its presidential approval polling.
A disaster, by the way.
Okay, so
in my view,
why did they stop doing it? So I wrote a story about this. So polling has gone into the polling industry is in crisis because of modern technology. So just the way you do a poll is you hire a bunch of people at a certain rate per hour to make phone calls. To create a sample. And you know, for example, that your sample, if you want a sample of 1,000 people, which is the ideal size, you have to have 520 women, 480 men. You have to have so many over 65, so many between 18 and 24. You know what the ethnic balance should be, and then you build your sample. The number of phone calls it takes to build your sample the numbers are in the article. I forget them now, but have dramatically gone up because people don't answer. And as the number of phone calls to make the sample rise, your costs in doing the sample rise. And so what one quickly thing you do is you cut the sample from 1,000 to 500, which sort of works. It's good enough. And you make other adjustments as well. And that's all assuming the best will in the world. Gallup got out because they would do their presidential approval polling as a loss leader. They used to have a partnership with CNN, which paid the bills. That ended a while ago. And they would say, okay, we'll continue to do it as a prestige item, but then you're exposed to presidential pressure. And so the Gallup decision is we're only making enemies here. We're not making, certainly not enough to make up for the business. We're not making money at this. Let's just exit the business.
And the disaster of that is that they had, 70 years worth of pretty good presidential approval data that you can go back and look at. And now those strings are starting to
And this is all assuming the best will in the world. Now, what happens when people say, you know what, the reputable people are being driven out of the business by the rise in costs? Here's an opportunity for us to do guerrilla marketing. And how much does it cost to make Polymarket move up and down? Probably not that much.
These are pretty low dollar figures on primaries and on small races.
So if you're
I think it's much better on the bigger races. I mean, it's a global thing. People are wagering on from Malta. I mean, here is a very specific thing.
So if you take
why we're kind of stress testing.
Can you put a couple $100,000 to make Polymarket do what you want it to do? I wonder. I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on the poll. Yeah,
and at the same time as other people are creating false polls to drive narratives. And in the end, as we saw, sooner or later, all of this meets the test of reality. But because journalists who rely on polls so much are reluctant to say, I think I was deliberately, I'm having a feeling that it's possible that the people I look to as sources deliberately lied to me over a long period of time. I'm just going to say the polling was bad because that's a much more comfortable. Everyone could say the polling was bad. It obviously was.
Yeah, and I think in something like this, you don't really have to, marshal the troops and say put some wagers on El Sayed in this because, if you're a sports fan, you don't have a ton of confidence in your team winning in the playoffs. You're still likely to wager on them, right? You're still going to be like, well, it's my team. I'll play. And a lot of this seems to me enthusiasm
motivated in that way.
From DSA types. Jason, I sent another link too. Can you pull up the Senate race? Not the primary one, but the actual Senate race, which is kind of interesting because now we have a real race, right? Statewide race with somebody who is an actual candidate who has, as David pointed out, would in another world be a normal Republican up until I think 2014, he sort of was. But now we have something that we'll be paying attention to here. And now this is the Michigan Senate election winner. And if you see El Sayed early on, March 5th, April 5th, you see these numbers, 80-20. And now reality is coming more into focus here. And El Sayed's numbers are going down. They're going down to now 60-40, which is pretty interesting when you see up here, which is an enthusiasm issue. And now there's the reality issue of two people running against each other in a statewide race. And also reflecting the fact that the primary was so damn close that had it not been for the spoiler, the Ralph Nader in this election who got 60,000 votes, who knows what, I mean, I don't think those people would have voted for al-Sayed. But now I'm Pat Buchanan in 2000. There you go. Right? So interesting one to watch as we get closer to November.
And again, these Polymarket ones, they're just building to the win. Did you get the win correctly? So it kind of doesn't matter if it's 93-7. If you get the win correctly, they still like.
No, I know that. I mean, that's the thing is the 99% the whole time. That's just very good money.
But that
binary.
But there's some moments in the day when there were some pretty interesting wagers to be had. But I think the whole thing is this is what happens when political parties tell on themselves, or movements within political parties tell themselves, are you willing to lose the general? Democrats in Michigan, they might not say this to themselves, they might not say it out loud. They're willing to lose the general. Michigan went to Trump twice. It's going to be D+5. It's a horrible year for Republicans, and deservedly so. It's a winnable race. Like, it's not going to be it's going to be close in Michigan, and that's important, right? If you're all your energy is built on like, no, we really have to take the Senate, right? Which is why a lot of people were holding their nose. Michelle Goldberg was at this table holding her nose, talking about Graham Plattner. It's just that important, even though Susan Collins is not the most reliable Trumpy voter out there, but it's just that important. If that's what you wanted to do, if that sense of pragmatism was governing you, you wouldn't have supported al-Sayed. He's beatable in a state that the Democrats should win, and that could flip things in a way that's pretty interesting.
David, what do you make of this? I mean, you mentioned Wisconsin, and that's Francesca Hong was running for governor there. We had a bunch of these races were really repulsive people with repulsive ideas in New York, who when you win the primary, you win the general, you're going to Congress. And every minute you see open up the New York Times, here's another DSA insurgent that you haven't paid attention to who's performing incredibly well. Is this, a moment, like when the Labour Party in England in the 80s had its socialist kind of split off, where you're going to have a little thing, a UKIP kind of thing, where it is a momentary thing, maybe has a little lasting power, maybe becomes something like reform, but doesn't seem like a permanent thing. Are we forever dealing with a Democratic Party now that is indulging these, I have to say, I think very much extremist ideas?
I wonder if there's something going on in every democracy that's more or less as follows. If you wanted a vote in 1885, you offered people a little bit of money or a shot of whiskey. Because it's a poor world, and a little bit of money and a shot of whiskey make a difference. If you want someone's vote in 1955, you're not going to get a vote for a little bit of money and a shot of whiskey. You have to give them a high school. You have to give them a dam. You have to bring a road. You have to do something substantial for them.
Government-run convenience store, grocery store.
You have to bring the goods, but you're not going to get their vote for the turkey or the turkey or the shot of whiskey. Well, we're now a much more prosperous society. We have lots of people who don't think they need that much from the government, and they're in politics to self-actualize.
It's a consumption good.
It's a consumption good, and so at that point, the kind of if I lose the general, if my party, life becomes more interesting for me. If my party wins, it's just a series of tedious technical administrative problems, all of them with very unsatisfactory and disappointing outcomes.
Now on a podcast, I can start a podcast,
right? I mean, what the left did not enjoy Obamacare. It's just a series of highly technical administrative problems. A new approach to the appeal of a Medicare for all.
Whether that's on a bumper sticker,
but it above all says, what if there were no medical scarcity? That's what that's because actually anyone who's ever had to deal with the actual Medicare deals with scarcity. They turn down claims. They don't cover. There are copays. Right. There's no escape from the tragedy of scarcity. But what if there were?
It's the same thing in the healthcare system in Sweden. They say nope. They put you on a waiting list. You have to pay for things, et cetera.
There's no escape. But so the problems of actually running the government. But when you lose, you don't have to run the government. You can fulminate and if you are removed enough. And so I think it's one of the things that people watch a place like Michigan say that the reason why the working class African-American districts tend to vote more pragmatically is because they are closer to the edge of necessity. They are not voting emotionally. They can't afford to. But the people with the postgraduate degrees, they can afford to vote emotionally, and they do, because if they lose, how bad will it be?
The how bad will it be is of interest to me, even bringing it back to what we started this whole conversation about, is your sense of the fragility, the Frum fragility meter. Where, and like the kind of panic that's engendered by that, where do you rank this era, flavor, and momentum of DSA candidates on the Frum fragility meter?
In the end, they're going to be limited by their inherent unpopularity. In the end, there is not going to be a communist government of the United States. There's not going to be a DSA government of the United States, and there isn't. If there were a serious campaign to do Medicare for all, it would involve dealing with scare. Well, of course, there will be higher.
They literally tried it in Vermont and couldn't do it.
Yeah, and even if you could do it. It's like Medicare for all is not the craziest, worst idea ever hatched. You just have to explain to people it means queues. You understand that. It means copays. It means scarcity. It is not a magic wishing pill. So I think they're limited by that. When I say what is on the David Frum meter, what am I most worried about is around the world, the United States is trusted or has been. And around the world, the whole world is seeing that Trump is plundering oil from Venezuela. He is taking bribes. He's made the treaties with the United States worthless. Why would anyone sign a treaty or a trade agreement with the United States when it's been demonstrated repeatedly that the United States does not feel – I mean, Donald may say, well, that's just Trump, but he's the president, and twice. And Biden in between, while better, was not as different as you might have thought. I mean, Biden entered no trade agreements. But Biden was the second most protectionist president since Herbert Hoover after Donald Trump. And Biden also was not all that comfortable with the idea that this is American leadership of a collective enterprise, that it's collective security led by America, but in which other people contribute. And the American job is both to round up the club dues from the other members, but in the end, to understand America will always pay a disproportionate price, and for that it gets a disproportionate voice, but not a sole voice.
It doesn't entirely map on. But if you go, I went back to your book from 2008 or 9. Was it Comeback?
My goodness. You're one of like 11 people who's read that book.
Yeah. I read it twice, so it's actually technically 10 people, but 11 people have gone all the way through it. Going back to that book, it's pretty interesting to me that there's a lot of stuff that maps on to parts of the Trump agenda, parts of a populism. I mean, you very much defend free trade in the book, which I appreciate, and very un-Trumpy, but immigration.
Yeah.
There's a line in that book that stuck out to me when I was reading it this weekend. It was something to the effect of, people don't want any more Bushes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that has a kind of Trumpy resonance in the kind of populism, like these are these dynasties that they're all rich guys. There's something about that. If you go back to that era when you were doing your own autopsy post George W. Bush, who you worked for briefly, does the Trump thing kind of make sense to you ideologically? If not, I mean, obviously not how it's executed. The man is unhinged, right?
Yeah.
But those instincts, the things that connected with people, a little more populism, because at the same time, I mean, you were the opposite of the Buchananites in 2002, 2003, et cetera. So what is that? I mean, am I wrong in thinking there's some sort of resonance
No,
there?
you're not. That's very perceptive. So first, I always think if you want to do immigration restriction, which I thought was right, both on merits and to head off the populist insurrection that I saw coming, free trade is your answer. When an American farmer says, "I need to bring all of these workers on temporary peonage into the United States, or otherwise I won't be able to harvest my strawberries," so, well, can we grow the strawberries in Mexico? can we grow the strawberry somewhere else? You don't have to bring the people if you can bring the product.
Why do you hate the American farm, David Frum?
And because maybe the American farmer will then say, well, what if I make the capital investments in robots so that people don't have? And one of the things that immigration has meant in the United States, the way, especially the high tolerance of illegality, is a tolerance of this brutal attitude toward the treatment of human beings. I mean, it's the most dangerous jobs in construction, roofing, drywalling, those could be made safer. They cost money. It would cost capital. Or you could hire people who don't have rights. And then you don't have to make the job safer. And then roofing and drywalling can continue to – and my vision of how – and again, I'm a market guy, but if you have consistently high rates of accident in these lines of work, people who have the job of worker safety should be thinking, what rules should we put in place, even if they demand more capital input from the employers to make these jobs more safe? And that will mean probably fewer workers earning a higher wage, and then it will be more attractive to hire people with rights. Like the core idea, one of the many revolutionary ideas of America, and it's been battled, and this is what the Civil War was fought over, was that every worker should be a voter. There should be no workers who are not voters, because otherwise they will be trampled and abused and exploited and treated like instruments of people who have more. And so that was my moral core, but also I saw this was going to lead to problems. But I did once have a talk with a prominent Trumper who had read the book and said, "You saw us coming, so why aren't you with us?" I said, "I saw you coming so I could stop you, not so I could help you."
But you have always been more on the restrictionist side when it comes to immigration. And I think that regardless of what you think about immigration in the American context, there are very few problems in the world and in modern sort of, let's just take Western Europe or Europe in general, not even Western Europe, in the United States, that immigration is not a part of. Right? The rise of all the populist parties in Europe that, change the policies. I mean, they're, all trade restrictionists, with maybe one exception in Norway, the Progress Party there. But that bleeds into every aspect of politics, and the nut of it is always immigration. Yeah. Always immigration. I mean, look, a long time ago in the show, I heard this the other day. I didn't mention this in the show. An Irish person talking to an American person who had been in South Africa and was working on a documentary there, and said, these guys were going into these neighborhoods and they were, with whips and, trying to get rid of the immigrants. And he's like, and they were all black. And I was like, the immigration's not about race necessarily. I mean, when Venezuelans leave because of Maduro, they're attacked in Brazil, they're attacked in Peru, they're attacked in Chile. Yep. When they come into India and Pakistan, Rohingya, they're attacked. Immigration is always the thing. I was just in Spain and I was just in Italy. I was in a town in Italy, Lucca, one of my favorite towns in Europe, and was reading an article in the newspaper that the mayor of Lucca is a kind of like ideological backbone of the re-migration movement. Lucca, this small Tuscan town, and this guy was fulminating against immigration, and you see it. You see very real consequences from this. But the reason in Italy,
the reason you have to restrict it is because the number you want is not zero. Yeah. Because you want and must have some, you must create a structure of law around what you do have, and you must consider the risk of destabilizing the existing society, often for irrational or bad reasons. Look, one of the triumphs of politics in whatever defines modernity is the ability to create broader and broader feelings of solidarity and sympathy among human beings. I mean, and we human beings are, at least in much of the world, human beings are better at this than they were 50 years ago or 100 years ago or 200 years ago.
I think that's true.
And that's the project is, we hope that 100 years from now, they will be better still, and that all kinds of barriers and prejudices and hatreds will fade. And But you can't just get there from here. You can't get there from here to there in one leap, and you can't get there from here to there without understanding the human material with which you're working, which contains so many aspirations to the good, but so many pulls toward the bad.
No, I mean, this is the Ceuta thing in Spain, and this is where I really disagreed with your friend, Anne Applebaum, who I've been a fan of. I reviewed one of her books for commentary in a very positive way, and she wrote a piece about this. And that's when I wondered, is Anne gone too far to just saying, well, the far right is exploiting this and I have to be on the other side of it? And she said, look, they all went back. They all went back to Morocco. 60,000 people. 80 people died, something like that. And there's some people hiding out there. But it was the perception. The perception in Spain, the perception that Giorgia Meloni was like, we are shutting down Schengen. But it's in Africa. It's like, no, the perception in European countries when you see videos of 60,000 people coming up, it's that sense of not no migration and not no immigration, but the sense of chaos is what is so common in the discourse amongst average people in Europe that it became in 2015. And then you see something like this, it reignites those memories of just utter chaos. How do we not even assimilate these people? How do we care for these people in any way at all? And the migration center in Ceuta was already full, and it's become a big problem for the Spanish. But even Pedro Sanchez, who is not a good leader in my opinion, was like, okay, too much. But I disagreed with her on that one. But
Michael had mentioned Pat Buchanan. You were talking to your modal Trump voter about like identifying things. I wonder. I totally agree with you about like the 89 to 94 period of being the time when we should have built new structures for the new time to extend the thing, change the terms of the thing, but also keep the underlying piece going. And I think for me, that was the greatest opportunity lost. Other people might say that, or like the side of the people who are on the side of that then blundered into Iraq. And I know that you've criticized yourself, or at least said that you were part of a problem of justifying the war in Iraq. And I have a great amount of respect for you for saying that, because many were in the post apology society. But what do you look at as the errors done by the kind of Atlanticists that helped give us Trump?
There are tragic errors where there are things that people did that turned out wrong, that they had every reason to think would not turn out wrong, or where they couldn't know. And so one of the greatest injustices in politics is, first, you don't get credit for the bad things that don't happen. And you're given an assumption that you had better knowledge than you do. So one thing I want to say about that era is, if an angel of God had stopped President George H.W. Bush on his way to take the oath in 1989, said, you're going to have one success. You're guaranteed one success. You can have whatever it is. You tell me what it is. I'm taking the message upstairs. One success. What is the one success you would want of your presidency? He said, I would like to feel, I'm sure what he would say, as the Soviet Union is coming to an end, I want to know that those 50,000 nuclear warheads that are loose in the Soviet Union and unsupervised and subject to what we're discovering, shockingly careless treatment, not one of them goes astray. Done. You got it. Well, if everything else goes wrong, then I have been a successful president. But who remembers now that the greatest fear in 1989 was that the 50,000
loose nukes,
and not even one of the Soviet nuclear scientists went astray, because your tax dollars paid to provide Soviet nuclear scientists with interesting, meaningful work at American taxpayer expense, so they didn't defect.
Also, George Soros contributed to that effort.
He did indeed, and the weapons were controlled. There are many. I don't know the number now, but many of them were decommissioned for a long time. The nuclear facilities in the United States were being run on Soviet nuclear fuel that was purchased, and putting money into that. So they had tremendous successes. I think it looks like in retrospect, the big thing that was not got right was not planning for the shock of China's return to world markets. And I think, by the way, listen, how many hundreds of millions of people have been pulled out of China? Poverty.
Because of that, yeah.
And that is a human success. The reduction in poverty, what has happened in China.
Globalist.
I'm thinking of I wore a suit and tie on the show, but if I didn't, I'd wear a hat that said "Make neoliberalism great again."
Yes. Yeah.
But pulling a couple 100 million Chinese out of poverty, tremendous human achievement. And ending Maoism and putting China on a path where it has an opportunity, and I never give up hoping that this will be the future, to be a good global citizen. I mean, if we can integrate China into some kind of world, what a better world this will be. I mean, avoiding a war, avoiding conflict with China, that's got to be one of the top 2 or 3 priorities for any American president. And one of the things worries me so much about Washington is we talk so much about the inevitability of this conflict. And of course you have to prepare for the worst, but every time you say it, you should also say, but we also are preparing. The hand of friendship is always out. The hand of agreement is always out, and we want to welcome China. We want to welcome China into. And as much as we've been disappointed since the past decade and a half, we shouldn't. The present leader won't be there forever, and there may be better leaders.
I would say one thing about Russia. There's a number of things like this. Providing money for nuclear scientists, and particularly, I have to go back and read Bill Safire's Chicken Kiev column because I'd love to. I have to refresh my memory of when and why he wrote that. That was an attack on George H.W. Bush. But there are a number of these things that the United States did, and there's a bunch of recent books about this, about the fall of the Soviet Union. So many people associated with the Hoover Institution too. That it has, after the forever Ukraine war, not Crimea, but I guess that was 22, right? Was it 22 when that happened? 2022? God, it's so long ago. That there was the Buchananite tendency on the American right, people like Tucker Carlson and his ilk, saying, we made the Soviets feel bad about themselves, right? That's the argument. Not only NATO expansion, which they misunderstand in almost every way, but it's that the humiliation of the Soviet Union. It's like, well, the United States did a lot of things to mitigate humiliation.
Your ear should prick up when they talk about the rape of Russia, which is what they talk about on the far right. There's something that they think that the people who are the villains of the story have in common.
Jews.
They're Jews. That's the big part of the story. Is what happened was when the Soviet economy imploded, and the effort was made to put together the pieces, that the first round of oligarchs were disproportionately Jewish and Armenian, and that is a big part of what they say. What went wrong in Russia was we turned Russia over to the Jews. So Buchanan is not explicit about this, but you get the idea. There are people from whom he's drawing his message who are much more explicit about it. The Soviet economy was not wrecked in the 1990s. It was wrecked by the Soviets. The reason it collapsed, and then there had been this effort that high oil prices disguised the wreck, military spending disguised the wreck. When the oil prices collapsed and the military spending stopped, then you were confronted. There's a New York Times reporter who wrote a fantastic book about the Soviet economy in the 80s, made the point that in the 1980s, the largest producer of shoes in the world was not Italy, not China, not the United States, it was Russia. And yet there were chronic shortages of shoes because what the Russians were doing, or the Soviets were doing, was taking perfectly good shoe leather and turning it into products that nobody wanted on the scale of hundreds of millions. And when this stopped, factories closed. But it wasn't the point of a shoe factory is not to employ the shoe workers. It's to make shoes, and they didn't have shoes. And when all of this wreck came to its inevitable ending, then yes, they'd left behind a lot of suffering. But the challenge that American policymakers had in the 1990s, and again, not saying they did everything right, but the last time they'd had to save a major economy like this was Germany and Japan after the war and the associated countries, where they had absolute political control. How much foreign aid can you pump into a society where you don't have political control? And you have to be much more. You can't just tell the Russians in 1995 that you'll do this and that, not this and that. And then we will fund you to the extent that we funded Germany and Japan could be funded in the way because no one had to look to see the account books. If you wanted to see the account books, no one had to worry about will we see the account books. You will see the account books.
There's something I'd love for you to square for me, and I'm thinking about this because my own libertarian orientation. I think it arrives in much the same way that you described about your kind of conservative inclinations, the notion that we have this thing that we have to protect and things can go badly very quickly. But you also said we're not going to have we're not on the verge of a communist revolution. It won't happen here, essentially. And
if it does, that clip's going to be so great. We're going to make so much money selling that clip.
If it does, we'll never see that clip
again. It'll
again.
never happen. Red flag goes up.
I'm inclined to agree that we're not on it doesn't seem like we're on the verge of it. But when things do start to snowball, it tends to happen quickly. It's on the back of some sort of weird national disaster or controversy. And as you were saying a moment ago, and the way you put it, I thought was really crisp and articulate. Like, our politics are fundamentally unserious in so many cases. It's superficial. At the moment, it is openly conspiratorial and vulgar. And the economic illiteracy is unbelievable. Yeah. And I've heard you unpack pretty basic economic ideas that most people would find pretty daunting, it seems. This is the reason tariffs don't make sense. Just a moment ago when you talked about Medicaid for all or Medicare for all, these are ideas that I think for people who have a basic free market orientation, it's pretty straightforward stuff. We get this. But I don't think that's most Americans. And I do think that the appeal for those kinds of policies and the necessity of building a government large enough to even theoretically deliver that stuff to you is a profound danger that we discount if we're not willing to acknowledge that, the possibility for the rot to begin on the left and kind of metastasize is real and profound in much the same way it is on the right.
Well, one thing about the viral clip, just to protect myself. I'm going to say, my hypothesis is in societies where property is broadly distributed, and in societies that have not gone through some unspeakable convulsion and trauma like military defeat, fascism is always going to beckon much more attractively than communism.
Okay.
And that you get where you have spontaneous communism, where you're not imposed by the Red Army, by occupation, but where you actually get a revolution where they win, is in societies where property is extremely narrowly concentrated, and that have been through Russia, China, Vietnam, extremely narrowly concentrated. Most people are propertyless. They have literally nothing to lose, and the situation is so disordered that you don't need to gain control of the bureaucracy. You can see the state is broken and it's easy to seize. And I don't think that describes the United States in any scenario that I can imagine being like that. The way since the middle of the 19th century, the way stable, successful societies have dealt with the demand of the far left is with concessions to the near left. People say, we have mass unemployment. People are going hungry. They can't feed their children. We're thinking about overthrowing the state. Would you take unemployment insurance? Yeah, take unemployment insurance. Okay. My mother, she's old. She can't work anymore. She has nothing. We want to overthrow the state. Would she take a pension? Yeah. She'd take a pension.
Sounds a bit like a hostage negotiation. But
it's a bit like understanding that radicalism, when radicalism gets big, it's because it's speaking to something real, and the job of creative statesmanship is to say, what is the grievance here? Is there something we could do that would take 80% of the followers away from the extremist movement? And so that the project that was done across the developed world, especially after World War II, but even before, of building social insurance, taking away the fear of unemployment, taking away the fear of hunger. That's the Civil Rights Project in the United States. You've got a disenfranchised, oppressed group of people. They might be open to revolutionary ideas. Who could blame them? Well, what if you made them full citizens? Would they take that? Yeah, maybe they take full citizens.
I was thinking the same thing the other day, yesterday when I was watching a clip on MSNBC of I can't remember the host interviewing somebody on a campus in Michigan. It was an Ann Arbor campus, and he was some student leader, and it was the same thing that I'd heard a million times. He's like, people of my generation are dissatisfied with the status quo. That was he started that way, and it went on for a handful of minutes. With no specificity, nothing specific. I mean, there are enormous numbers of problems in this country, as there are in almost every country on the planet. But abundance isn't one of them. Guys probably, gets off the interview and immediately checks it on his phone that cost $1,000 and is, well clothed and the rest of it. And it's in this kind of vague way that, they're talking in a revolutionary way without any specificity of what the problems that the revolution is going to address. They can get, I mean, also notice it must be really frustrating for people who have been devoted to the kind of never Trump cause that almost none of it is about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
There's very little talk about Donald Trump. There is some overlap, of course. I mean, we were talking the other day on the show, Bloomberg had a piece of how many companies now
Yeah.
does the United States have a stake in?
30.
I mean, what? This is conservatism? I mean, trade problems, et cetera, which they love all that stuff. But before we go, David, we talked about Pat Buchanan a couple times, and it came up, and Matt and I were talking about this the other day. The piece that people hate you for the most. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
Do you want to tell me the name of it?
Unpatriotic Conservatives.
Correct. That was 2003?
Yeah.
National Review. That more than anything else, particularly amongst the kind of paleo conservatives, certain types of libertarians, anti-war libertarians. Talk us through that now.
Okay.
20 plus years later, do you
25.
regret the piece? Do you think it
Oh,
was
no.
the headline? Do you,
No.
do you
Prescient?
Was it
What I say
prescient?
is if you drop a brick on somebody's foot
Yeah.
and 25 years later the foot is still broken, that was some brick. That was some brick. Why do they hate the piece so much? Because it was so true. And why was it so true? Because if you go back and re-engineer the piece, you will discover astonishingly little of it is written in my words. It's quotations. It's all one quotation after another. And what it showed, and what people who talk about that piece, which was published in National Review in 2003, want to say it was a piece about the Iraq War. In the very first paragraph, it says, Iraq War, it's important to debate it. There are people on all sides.
Including at National Review.
Yeah. And I want to say, not that this is not internal to the piece and probably should have, but the same day that I published the piece, I had at that time I was writing a blog for National Review, and I had a long and favorable account on the blog of somebody who'd written an impassioned article against entering the Iraq War. It said the problem here is what you've got is a group of people who are so alienated from the tendencies in American society. They're becoming alienated from the American government and the American Constitution, and they so hate the world in which the modern world. They are turning to these extremist ideas of actually hoping that they're for the overthrow of their society. And the piece, it is the blueprint to what was to come, and not just the Trump movement specifically, but the broader anti-modernist, post-liberal right. It saw all of this coming, and it did it out of their own mouths. That's why
Except
they can't
for
forgive it.
the last three paragraphs where that's what everyone quotes, right?
Yeah.
It's they have come to hate their country. They're rooting for America to lose.
Well, when I said they have come to hate their country and they're rooting to America to lose, there are about a dozen quotations in which people, in their own words, say, "I have come to hate my country and I'm rooting for America to lose." But they had come to because what I wrote a book a decade later about the end of the Romney campaign, and I said, to love your country is to love it as it is. When you say, "I can't stand it now," but if we could get rid of all of the people I don't like. If we could get rid of all the social changes of the past 50 years, then I'd love it. Well, then you love some fantasy that you project it, because you're right wing, you project the fantasy back into the past. Leftists would project into the future. But it's a fantasy. You don't love the country, the actual demotic, pulsing, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multicultural, multi-ideology America, this big mess of a thing. You don't love that. You hate that.
But you could also say that, using his own quotations, that Donald Trump doesn't love this country, that Stephen Miller doesn't love this country. I mean, even when they're in office, we don't have a country anymore because of birthright citizenship or whatever, like the American carnage speech. There is a whole lot of that. Yeah. Is it fair to level that accusation against Donald Trump as well? Well,
Donald Trump has done his utmost to damage American institutions, American world leadership.
I might not disagree with any of that, but it's just I'm talking about the level of the accusation about
Donald Trump's
people hating their countries.
What does Donald Trump love except self?
Gold.
It's actually
so much.
it's too specific to say he doesn't love his country. Would be too specific an indictment. He doesn't love his wife. Doesn't love his kids. He doesn't.
That's rough. You're accusing a man of not loving his wife and kids.
He doesn't love dogs. He doesn't love. He hasn't. This is a person who is.
I don't think he likes his wife or kids. By the way, just a guess. I have no evidence.
Yeah,
but when I saw the video of Barron when he was 5, still speaking with a Slovenian accent, meant that his father wasn't talking to him very much, right?
Yeah.
Love comes in a lot of different ways.
So this is. In a way, to talk about him personally takes you down into directions that are so specific and so dark that they don't actually help with the problem the country has. But the reason that the people who I talked to in that piece, they felt its truth. That's why they like if somebody slurs you in some way, your World Cup goaltending record is not is all fake. You'd smile that up. Say, "Well, I actually don't. I never claimed to have a World Cup goaltending record." That bounces right off. That bounces right off.
I mean, as a matter of fact, one or two of the people that you were singling out for criticism in that piece spend a lot of acres of words pointing at me and accusing me of all kinds of nefarious things, and I don't like. I remember it only by reading the name at the bottom of the Unpatriotic Conservatives. It didn't touch because I'm not, as it turns out, a neocon or a CIA agent. At least
you were
not yet.
accused of both.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I think one covers the other.
I think they're a quarter century later. There are probably phrases I would amend, and just generally, I think it's always a good idea to dial it back a notch. That would be my advice to any writer. Dial it back a notch, always. And that piece, which was written at a very emotional moment, it could have stood to be dialed back a notch. But the core of what it said, that's it. Why did it stay in use? Why does anyone still care? Think of how many things one writes that never land. Why did the hook go in the fish and never come out again?
You were trying to read people out of the conservative movement, and out of the Republican coalition, and people tend to remember such exercises pretty poignantly.
Well, the reason that was so explosive was there was a contest for the future of the conservative movement, and at the time, the thing that the piece got wrong was at the time I thought that the people who believed in what I believe in would prevail. And at the time, we were the temporary majority. I said, okay, this is going to be the future. And indeed, we did not prevail. And the future of the political so one of the reasons the piece should be a source of pleasure to those who I criticize. As I said, we are not going to be, the conservatism of tomorrow will not be ethnically exclusive. It will not be chauvinist. It will not be localist. It will not be protectionist. It will not be reactionary. It will be democratic. It will be open. And no, David Frum, you got wrong.
Well, so the prediction that you got wrong. You acknowledge that this. I thought my vision of conservatism would be triumphant. Is there a piece that you can think of that you wrote where it's not a prediction? It's just you go back and look at it and it's like, Jesus, I can't believe I thought that. I was totally wrong.
Things I thought that was totally
like not in the sense. I mean, you said earlier. I mean, you change your mind over time. You grow up. You soften on a bunch of things. Is there anything that you look back on? In not, predictions can be wrong and you can still have the same beliefs. Is there any belief that you had that you put into, like one that you're really like, I wish that one would disappear from the record?
Okay. I wouldn't want them to disappear from the record because you can't be who you are without the people you were. Mm-hmm. And so everything you believe is the product of the experiences you've had and the mistakes you've made along the way. Yeah. So you can never wish to be undifferent. But I was a big opponent of gay marriage in the 1990s, and I changed my mind on that. Mm-hmm. And I think that view in the I came to it for conscientious. We were at the beginning of this crisis of family stability and the interrelations of the sexes, and I thought, well, the answer to that is to make sure that there's a much stricter binary between marriage and non-marriage. The multiplication of all of these statuses of what do they call them? Relationships and situationships and cohabitations is creating a blur that is pushing people away from the binding forms that are best for themselves and best for the next generation of children. And I saw gay marriage as another one of those blurrings of the line. But in what I came to believe in the early 2000s was I was a side issue. The problem, this was a solution that was not, the problem was real, but this is a solution that is punitive on some and not responsive. And even if you win the argument, and then you become aware that for a lot of people this is driven by they don't intend to live better lives themselves. They just want to punish somebody else. So I've changed my mind on that one. I think compared to the 1990s, I'm generally accepting of a broader social insurance state than I was in 1993 and 1994. I appreciate now more its contribution to political stability, giving people I'm never going to. If you live in a developed country, you're never going to go hungry. You're not going to be poor in your old age. You're never. There are certain things you can take for granted, no matter how much and even if it's your own fault, even if it's 100% your own fault, there's still something that is behind you, that we're not going to let these extremes of human misery be in our society. And I can think of some other things. But I'll tell you one thing that I got right on this non-prediction. It's my first book. One of the major themes of the first book was I didn't think the religious right had a big future. And I wrote in the future that the future, the antagonism to what I want to see is going to come from nationalism and xenophobia and race, not from exclusive religious Christian overbearing faith or other forms of reactionary. The religious right is at the peak of its power and is on its way out. And so I think in 2000, a little bit under the influence of the spirit of national unity after 9/11, I allowed myself to think. I allowed myself to revisit that view of 1994. So you know what, the conservative movement can actually free itself from this. And I think one of the things that needs to be said is that article was I did not bring that project to National Review. National Review asked me to do it. I was expressing so when I said we do this, we do that, I was expressing a consensus view of a lot of people who then were nowhere to be seen as soon as things got warm.
Yeah. Well, David, it's good to end there and realize that you've made this arc towards the
Justice.
gay welfare state. That's where, David Frum's homosexual welfare state.
Yeah.
That's where it ends with these Canadians.
You know,
they're going to make us all gay. Big welfare state.
A strap on in every pot.
Yeah. It's just going to happen. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
It was good to see you. It's been a very long time. And I'll be listening to the podcast.
Thank you.
And even if it's about Herbert Hoover's farm policy or whatever the hell the last episode
was. You know what? I hate to tell you this.
Probably was, right? Yeah. But at least you had Margaret Hoover on.
Yes, that was something.
That's the excuse. That's the excuse. Otherwise, if it was you monologuing next episode, okay, Taft, people are going to unsubscribe. I'm just giving you a tip. It's my business mind here. So thank you, David. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
We know of new methods of attack.